The studio air felt like static before a lightning strike, charged, tense, and about to break. Donald Trump leaned forward in his chair, lips curled into that signature smirk, as if he was already winning a battle that hadn't even begun. Across from him, Denzel Washington sat upright, calm, eyes locked on Trump like a man who had seen this game 1,000 times before. No banter, no warm-up. Just straight to it. "You think you're untouchable," Denzel said, his voice low but cutting through the room like a blade. "But every man has a weakest point. And you've been hiding yours behind gold walls." The crowd and the live audience stirred, some leaning forward, others glancing nervously at each other. The moderator tried to interject, but Trump waved him off with an impatient flick of his hand. "Weakest point, please. The only weakness here is Hollywood thinking it knows anything about running a country." Denzel didn't blink. "It's not Hollywood talking. It's someone who's seen what happens when power is used like a personal brand. And you've built your entire career on selling that brand, at the expense of the very people you claim to represent." Trump's smile faltered for a split second, just long enough for the cameras to catch it. The audience murmured, small, sharp whispers that spread like a ripple. He tried to laugh it off. "That's rich coming from a guy who plays make-believe for a living." Denzel leaned in. "The difference? When I act, everyone knows it's fiction. You've been acting for decades, and you call it leadership." The line hit like a punch. The crowd erupted, half cheering, half gasping, while Trump's jaw tightened. For the first time, the former president's eyes darted toward the cameras, as if suddenly aware that millions were watching this exact moment unfold. The tension was no longer building. It was here, raw and alive, and the audience could feel that this wasn't going to be a polite exchange. This was going to be a demolition. Trump straightened his tie, a telltale sign that the hit had landed harder than he wanted anyone to know. He leaned back in his chair, trying to reclaim the upper hand. "You know what, Denzel? I've built more in my life than you could ever dream of. Skyscrapers, hotels, golf courses, you name it. People respect that." Denzel's eyes didn't waver. "You built towers, sure. But what's inside them? People working 3 jobs just to afford the rent, while you brag about marble floors and gold elevators." The moderator tried again to steer the conversation, sensing the clash was on the verge of boiling over, but it was too late. Neither man was letting go. Trump leaned forward, voice dripping with mockery. "Spare me the lecture. You're an actor. You pretend to be heroes on screen, I actually am one. I saved this country from total collapse. That was it." Denzel's expression shifted, calm, but with a sharp edge. "Heroes don't bankrupt the very people they're supposed to protect. Heroes don't make everything about themselves. And heroes definitely don't need to have their names in gold letters to prove they matter." The audience roared, half in approval, half in shock. Trump glanced toward them, irritation flickering across his face. "Oh, I get it. You're playing for applause. Hollywood script, right? Say something dramatic, get a reaction. That's your game." Denzel shook his head slowly. "No, my game is truth. Yours is distraction. And right now, you're losing at both." Gasps. Murmurs. Phones lifted into the air as audience members started recording, knowing they were witnessing something that would be replayed for days. Trump tried to laugh it off, but his voice came out tighter, clipped. "Careful, Denzel. You don't know who you're talking to." Denzel leaned in, his tone almost a whisper, quiet enough that the studio leaned forward, but loud enough for the mics to catch. "Oh, I know exactly who I'm talking to. And so does everyone watching." The silence that followed was heavier than the applause that came seconds later. Trump's eyes narrowed. The battle lines weren't just drawn, they were carved in stone. Trump's jaw tightened as the applause lingered. He tapped his fingers on the desk, a staccato rhythm that betrayed his irritation. "You talk a big game, Denzel, but you've never had to sit in the Oval Office and make the decisions I've made. You've never had to face the media tearing you apart day after day." Denzel gave a faint smile, the kind that carried more weight than a shout. You think you've cornered the market on being attacked? Try being a black man in America for 68 years. Try walking into rooms where people decide who you are before you've even opened your mouth. A low rumble of reaction swept through the audience, some clapping, others shifting uncomfortably. Trump chuckled, shaking his head. Oh, here we go. Play the race card. That's all you people ever do when you're losing the argument. The moderator froze, eyes darting between the two men. A few audience members gasped audibly. But Denzel didn't flinch. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the desk. You think this is about a card? This is about reality. And the fact that you call it a card is exactly the problem. Trump tried to jump in, but Denzel's voice cut through him, measured and sharp. You've made a career out of dismissing people's struggles as exaggerations. You stand on stages and talk about the forgotten Americans, but you've never truly listened to them. You just sell them a dream you have no intention of delivering. The audience erupted, half cheering, half booing, the sound bouncing off the studio walls. Trump's smirk returned, but it was thinner now, forced. You're good with words, Denzel. But words don't build jobs, they don't build industries. Denzel nodded once. True. But words do expose lies. And right now, that's exactly what's happening. A camera operator zoomed in tight on Trump's face, catching the flicker of unease. Somewhere in the control room, a producer whispered, "We've got TV gold." Trump's reply was quick, almost defensive. Careful, Denzel, you're walking a fine line. Denzel didn't blink. The truth is the line. And I'm not the one crossing it. The room erupted again, and for the first time, Trump looked like he was the one playing catch-up. Trump straightened in his chair, his hands gripping the armrests so tightly the knuckles went pale. The usual showman swagger was still there, but it was fraying at the edges. You want to talk about truth? He barked, leaning forward. Here's the truth, you sit in Hollywood, surrounded by elite friends, making millions, while I'm out there fighting for the working man. The crowd roared, half in support, half in protest, but Denzel didn't move. He tilted his head, almost studying Trump like a puzzle. Fighting for the working man? You mean the same working man whose healthcare you tried to cut? The same people who needed help during the pandemic but got scraps while corporations walked away with billions? Trump's lips twitched. That's fake news and you know it. You're parroting the same garbage CNN pushes. Denzel leaned back, but his eyes never left Trump's. His voice stayed calm, and that calmness burned hotter than any shout. The difference between you and me, Donald, is that I've sat at kitchen tables with those people. I've looked in their eyes when they told me they were losing everything. And not once did I tell them their pain was a lie. A stunned silence hit the room. Even the moderator seemed frozen, her cue cards trembling slightly in her hands. Trump's voice rose, louder, sharper. You think you're the savior here? You're an actor. You read lines someone else wrote for you. I built things, real things. Denzel's smile returned, slow and razor-sharp. You built towers, Donald. I build trust. And trust is something you can't buy, can't brand, and can't bully into existence. The audience exploded, cheers and boos crashing together like waves in a storm. Cameras caught every flicker of expression on Trump's face, from fury to a flicker of doubt. Trump slammed a hand on the desk, the sound echoing across the studio. You're twisting everything. You don't know what it takes to lead a country. Denzel's reply was quiet but surgical. Maybe not. But I know what it takes to lead with honesty. And that's the one job requirement you keep failing. The words hung in the air like a gavel strike, and for a moment, the studio felt more like a courtroom, one where Trump was on trial and Denzel was delivering the closing argument. The studio's atmosphere had shifted from heated debate to something far more volatile, like a lit match hovering over gasoline. You could feel the audience leaning forward, holding their breath, waiting for the next verbal strike. From the corner of the stage, the producer frantically waved at the moderator, mouthing, "Move on. Move on." But no one in that room was moving on. Not with Trump's jaw clenched like a steel trap and Denzel's gaze fixed on him like a laser. Trump pointed a finger across the table. "You're grandstanding for the cameras. You think people out there care about your speeches? They care about results, and I deliver results." Denzel didn't blink. "Results," he said, his voice steady but sharp. "If your results were so good, people wouldn't be lining up at food banks. They wouldn't be working 2 jobs and still falling behind on rent. Results that only benefit the top aren't results, they're theft." The crowd erupted, half of them cheering like they just witnessed a knockout punch, the other half booing so loud the mics caught the feedback. Trump smirked, leaning back as if to regain control. "I know what this is. You're trying to score a viral moment. Newsflash, it's not going to work. You're in my arena now." Denzel leaned forward, elbows on the desk, voice low enough that the cameras had to zoom in to catch it. "Your arena? No, Donald. This is the people's arena. And they're tired of watching you turn it into a circus." At that exact moment, a monitor in the corner flashed live social media reactions. Tweets, captions, and clips of the exchange were already flooding in. One trending tag read, #Denzel's Trump. Another simply said, "Trust Towers." The audience saw it too, and the energy surged. Phones lit up across the studio, people whispering, "It's blowing up online already." Trump caught sight of the trending feed and scoffed. "Social media is just noise." Denzel's reply was instant. "Noise can topple walls, Donald. Ask history." That line landed like a thunderclap. Some in the crowd leapt to their feet, clapping and shouting. Others sat frozen, staring at the stage as if they'd just witnessed a turning point. The moderator's voice cracked as she tried to jump in. "All right, let's." But it was too late. The story had already left the studio. By the time the commercial break should have started, the studio was no longer just a studio, it was a live wire sparking straight into millions of homes. In the control room, producers yelled over each other, "We're staying live. Don't cut, this is everywhere." On the massive screen behind the set, the trending topics list kept refreshing, climbing at a speed no one could track. #Denzel's Trump was now at the top, followed by #Truth Over Towers and #Circus No More. Every network had switched gears, cheerins flashed across rival channels. Breaking, Washington takes aim at Trump in explosive live clash. Trump glanced at the screen, his eyes narrowing. "You think hashtags run the world?" he scoffed, adjusting his tie in a show of forced composure. "Real leaders don't answer to Twitter mobs." Denzel didn't miss a beat. "No, Donald. Real leaders answer to the people. The problem is, you've confused one for the other." Gasps rippled through the audience, sharp, audible, like a wave breaking against a seawall. In that instant, a live social media feed was piped into the broadcast. Tweets and comments poured in, some calling Denzel, the only one brave enough to say it, others slamming him as Hollywood elitism on display. But regardless of the side, the engagement was wildfire. An anchor from a rival news network interrupted their own program, voice urgent, "We're breaking into coverage of the Denzel-Trump exchange. This is unprecedented." The moderator, now visibly sweating under the lights, tried to regain control. "Gentlemen, we need to stay on topic." Trump cut her off. "The topic is this: he's an actor pretending to understand policy. And I'm the one who's actually done the job." Denzel leaned back slightly, the faintest smirk on his lips. "Pretending? Donald, you've been pretending your whole career, just with bigger budgets." The crowd reaction was instant, half the room roared, the other half hissed. Phones stayed up, recording every second, as if everyone knew these moments would be replayed for weeks. The camera panned out, catching the moderator's exhausted face, the stage split into 2 worlds, one man fuming, the other calm but relentless. Somewhere in the background, a producer muttered into his headset, we've lost control of this show. No one in the audience disagreed. Trump's jaw was tight now, his usual smirk replaced with a glare that could have cut glass. The studio lights caught the sheen of sweat forming on his forehead, but he didn't blink. You think you're some kind of truth-teller, Denzel? You're just another overpaid performer who got lucky. Denzel didn't flinch. His eyes stayed locked on Trump like a marksman refusing to break aim. And you, he said slowly, built an entire brand on fear. Not leadership, fear. Fear sells, and you've been cashing in for decades. The crowd erupted, not in applause or boos, but in that low, electric hum of disbelief. People were leaning forward in their seats, eyes darting between the two men like watching a high-speed chase about to end in a crash. Trump jabbed a finger in Denzel's direction, his voice rising. You don't know what it takes to run anything that matters. You've never had to deal with real stakes, real lives, on the line. Denzel's tone stayed level, which somehow made it sting more. Lives have always been on the line, Donald. You just never had to live with the consequences of yours. The moderator's hands shot up as if trying to slow a train. Gentlemen, please. But the control room had already decided to stop interfering. Every second was gold, the kind of unpredictable television executives dream about but can never manufacture. A camera operator zoomed in on Trump's clenched fists resting on the desk. Another caught Denzel's steady, unwavering stare. The split-screen shot looked more like a title card for a prize fight than a political discussion. From the back row of the audience, someone yelled, "Let him finish, Trump." Another voice countered, "Sit him down, Donald." The tension was no longer contained to the stage, it had spilled into the seats, into the feeds, into every living room watching. Trump leaned forward now, both palms on the table, his voice low but seething. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Denzel gave the faintest nod. Oh, I do. And so does everyone watching. The camera stayed tight on their faces. No one moved. No one dared breathe too loud. It wasn't just a conversation anymore. It was a standoff. The silence in the studio was sharp enough to slice through steel. Even the audience members who had been shouting seconds earlier were frozen, caught in the gravitational pull of the standoff. Trump's fingers drummed against the desk, each tap louder than it should have been. Finally, he leaned back, a smile flickering at the edges of his mouth, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You think you've cornered me, Denzel? You think you can play the hero in my arena? Denzel's gaze didn't waver. This isn't your arena, Donald. It's the people's. You just rent the spotlight. The crowd let out a sharp gasp, and somewhere in the back, a laugh broke the tension for just a split second, until Trump snapped, pointing toward the audience like a prosecutor. You think he's funny? You think this guy speaks for you? He's an actor. A pretender. I built towers. He just reads scripts. Denzel's reply came without a pause, the timing surgical. And yet, here we are, and you're the one performing. It was the kind of line that didn't just land, it detonated. Half the audience shot to their feet, clapping and shouting. The other half booed so loudly the floor seemed to vibrate. The split in the crowd was a perfect mirror of the country watching at home. Trump's voice jumped an octave, raw with frustration. You don't know what real power is. He slammed his hand on the desk so hard that the microphone clipped, sending a metallic pop through the speakers. Denzel leaned in, his voice dropping to a near whisper, just enough for the boom mics to catch. Real power isn't about who shouts the loudest. It's about who tells the truth when it's dangerous. The line sucked the air out of the room. Even Trump seemed momentarily thrown off, blinking as if recalibrating. The control room director's voice crackled into the cameraman's headsets, "Stay close on Denzel, this is the shot." For a long beat, no one moved. Then Trump, jaw tight, pushed his chair back with a screech that echoed in the studio. The sound was like a starting gun, the tension snapped, and the entire place erupted into a storm of noise. The moderator tried to speak, but his voice was lost under the roar. This wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a showdown, and both men knew there was no turning back. Trump's chair screeched back another inch, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrests. The lights above seemed hotter, harsher, as if even the studio itself was leaning in to watch what would happen next. He jabbed a finger at Denzel, his voice booming. "You've made a career pretending to be other people, but I've been the man in the arena. I've fought wars in boardrooms, in politics, in the media. You don't know the first thing about that." The audience was a powder keg, half of them roared in approval, the other half booed so loudly it shook the air. Denzel didn't blink. He slowly stood up, the studio cameras tracking his every move. "You're right, Donald," he said, his tone calm but cutting. "I haven't spent my life playing power games. I've spent it looking people in the eye and telling them the truth, whether it made me friends or enemies. And here's the truth, your legacy isn't about what you've built, it's about what you've broken." A deep, guttural "oh" rolled through the crowd, the sound swelling until it felt like the walls might crack. Trump slammed his palm against the table, leaning forward so far the moderator instinctively shifted back. "Don't lecture me about legacy, Denzel. You're standing here because I made this country strong enough for you to speak your mind without consequences." The jab hung in the air, sharp, personal, dangerous. Denzel stepped closer, closing the space between them. His voice dropped, but every syllable was crystal clear. "Freedom doesn't come from men who think they own it. It comes from those willing to defend it, even from people like you." The moment was electric. The crowd exploded, shouts, applause, and furious boos collided in a deafening storm. Cameramen were struggling to keep their shots steady as security edged closer to the stage, sensing the heat. Trump's face was flushed now, his jaw tight, his eyes narrowing into slits. "You just crossed the line," he said, his voice low but vibrating with rage. Denzel didn't move. Then maybe the line needed crossing. The moderator's earpiece buzzed with frantic instructions from the control room, "Go to break, go to break." But the network didn't cut away. They knew the audience at home was leaning forward, breathless, unwilling to miss a single word. This was no longer a conversation. It was a collision course, the moderator's voice was trembling now. "Gentlemen, we..." "Don't gentleman me," Trump snapped, never taking his eyes off Denzel. "You think you're some kind of hero? You're just an actor reading lines someone else wrote. I've lived this. I've taken the hits. You just perform." The words landed heavy, meant to strip Denzel of any ground to stand on. The crowd erupted in gasps and whispers, the energy boiling over into shouts of, "Let him finish," and "Sit down, Trump." Denzel's expression didn't change. Slowly, almost deliberately, he took a step forward, just enough to be in Trump's space, enough for the cameras to catch the sharp contrast between their faces. His voice was quiet, but every note cut through the noise like a blade. "You want to talk about taking hits," he began, the room leaning in. "I've stood with mothers who buried their sons. I've looked in the eyes of veterans who fought for a flag they no longer recognize. And I've told the truth in rooms full of men like you, men who think power is something you own, not something you earn." Trump opened his mouth, but Denzel didn't let him. "You've built towers, Donald. I've built trust. And here's the thing, when a tower falls, it's just rubble. But when trust is broken, nations crumble." The crowd roared, half of them on their feet, the other half booing loud enough to shake the glass of the studio's control room. The moderator's earpiece crackled again, producers shouting for a commercial break, but no one moved. Trump stood now, face flushed, his tie slightly askew. He leaned into the mic. "You just made a big mistake." Denzel tilted his head, a faint, almost dangerous smile crossing his lips. "Or maybe I just told America what it already knows." The audience went wild, phones in the air, capturing the moment they knew would go viral before the night was over. Security edged closer, but the tension wasn't physical, it was in the words, the truths, the jabs that had turned into open war. As the camera zoomed in for one final shot, Denzel turned slightly toward the audience, his voice carrying over the chaos. "Power doesn't make you untouchable," he said. "It just makes the fall that much harder." The network finally cut to black. But by then, the damage, and the legend, was done. In this country, the truth will always outlast the noise. And no matter how high you build yourself up, the ground is always waiting.